Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to our Gospel of Luke reading group, and I'm happy to be sharing this with a few people live and recording it. We are picking up in Luke chapter 1, verse 46, and this passage is Mary's response to the baby John the Baptist jumping in the womb of Elizabeth at the greeting of Mary. And so Elizabeth is amazed at this, and she says something, and Mary then is here speaking in response. And I wanted to show you the Latin, why this passage is called the Magnificat is because of the Latin. And right here, Magnificat is the Latin translation of Mary's, right here, saying Mega Luni e psuchemu, so anima mea dominum. So my soul magnifies the Lord, Magnificat. And so this is the beginning of her response in praise of God. So Latin is important to learn. Wolfhart Pannenberg, a great systematic theologian, probably one of the top ones of the last century, said to me, he came to our campus at Asbury, and we were having some faculty meet and greet and talk and stuff like that. And he chatted with me, and I was at the time, I had just finished my master's of divinity and was teaching Greek and Hebrew at the seminary. And he said, make sure you learn Latin, is what he told me. So if you haven't read any of his work, it is profoundly exegetical as he systematizes it and brings it into conversation with contemporary philosophy and anthropology and these kinds of things. So I highly recommend getting a hold of some of his works, his systematic theology. What's so amazing to me, he's a German theologian, is the depth that he brings to the exegesis. So, I mean, he could handle the Greek text great, as he's working and interpreting these passages, the richness of his exposition and dialogue with the broader philosophy of his day was and systems of knowledge. That's what systematic theology does. Was quite amazing. So we're in verse 46, and so let's go ahead and read it and translate it. Ke ipen Mariam megaluni e psuchemu ton kurion. Ke agali asento pneumamu epi to theo to soterimu. So I read two verses there. And Mary said, so this is a simple kind of setup, not much to notice there. We're moving into a direct quotation. And then we have typical word order, VSO. We have verb, subject, object, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my drawing mode on. There we go. So we have, so Greek typically has a VSO order. This is the default order. And this verb, this sentence, really shows that. So subject, single underline, verbs and subjects, they go together. And that's why they're both single underlined. Draw arrows from genitives to what they modify, and then double underline the objects. And really, that's what most sentences consist, or the typical sentence here is verb, subject, and object. And so this perfectly displays it. Everything else in the sentence is a modifier, and we need to pay attention to those modifiers. So my soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit, that's actually, it shouldn't be double underlined. That's the subject. My spirit rejoiced, and this is aorist tense. So this one is present, megaluni, but then agali asen is iasen is aorist, third singular. So aorist indicative. My spirit rejoiced in God, my Savior. So notice that the English translation here puts has rejoiced, which makes it seem like it's perfect tense, but in fact it's perfective aspect, simple aorist, rejoiced. And we could start to parcel out, well, what use of the aorist, what use of the perfective aspect does this verb carry? And there is some usage that scholars have designated, parceled out, that could be like consummative or something like that, some kind of use. There's these labels that scholars will use to describe. And the consummative or perfective aorist would have the sense of emphasis on resultant effect, which would make it seem almost like a perfect tense verb form, the resultative or stative tense. So I think what's conveyed here, there may be something analogous to the Psalms translated from the Hebrew, is a lot of times they will use aorist tenses, even though it seems like it's more of a present tense utterance. So there may be some stylistic parallel with the Psalm literature from the Septuagint. But yeah, we did have to think about that. It could be that Mary is affirming that maybe the constancy, that this is something in the past, like my spirit has rejoiced in God, my Savior. Like this is a past affirmation of Mary's epistemic disposition of rejoicing. Like she knows that the Lord, she's always known and knew in the past and rejoiced. And it may be that the aorist is used because there's an acute circumstance that has brought about rejoicing in a past moment. And I think we might see that in verse 48. So we'll continue looking at that. Was there a particular moment that prompted a past tense understanding of rejoicing? So my soul rejoiced in God, and God, who is further given appositional specification as my Savior. So I'm going to close off that prepositional phrase. So terimu is an apposition to God. So God is the one, the kind of the basis of the rejoicing that is taking place in Mary's spirit. Because oti epeplepsen epitein tapinosin tes doules avtu idugar apotu nun makari usin me passe e genea. So I just read verse 48. Because he looked upon the humility of his maidservant, for behold, from now on, all the generations will consider me blessed. Will consider me blessed. This is actually future tense. So let's break this down. The OT indicates a supporting kind of statement. It's here we can see that you can use gar as a strengthening statement. That little arrow indicates strengthening. But what's the difference between ot and gar? Gar is, and from my understanding currently, gar is a distinct proposition. So gar is considered a coordinating conjunction, whereas ot is a subordinating conjunction. But sometimes they're translated that basically the same. And you can see here over to the right, in fact, that they are translated both as for. But OT is to me, in my mind, so OT is a dependent conjunction, a subordinating conjunction. So when I see a clause, the main clause supported by an OT subordinate clause, I think that the OT, its subordination is more intricately connected to the main idea conceptually. There's a closer conceptual conception of the main clause with the supporting clause, whereas when you go with a GAR clause, a GAR independent sentence, you're getting an individuated proposition. So conceptually, it's a separate proposition. So there's a closer connection. That's what in my best thinking right now, that the OT has. And here, the question that we asked is, why is there this specific moment of perfective aspect of rejoicing, my spirit rejoicing? The answer to that is provided in 48a, because he saw the humility of his maidservant, or the humbleness, the humble state of, he looked upon that humble state of his maidservant. Okay, so epitain tapinosin tes doules. Doules is referring to a handmaiden, like a maid servant, female servant, and then it's modified by avtu, which is his. So he looked upon epiblepsen. This is future, blepo, third singular. There is some redundancy, but this is common with this verb, epi. So you have the epi, and then you have the prepositional phrase epi, starting with epi. So the epi preposition can be added as a prefix to verbs, and then you have a little bit of redundancy with the prepositional phrase. It probably is required, though. For some verbs, you don't need that redundancy in the preposition added to the verb. Sometimes you don't need it, but here you do. I think there is a little bit of stress on that object of looking upon. In other words, he could have just said he looked upon, but blepo means to look, but he uses epiblepo, which even more construes the seeing as a directed gaze. And particularly then, the direction of God's gaze is in fact the humility of his maidservant. For behold, then, second part of verse 48, for behold, from now on, apotu nun, and you have to go to the end of the sentence to get the subject. All generations will consider me blessed. And this verb, makari idzo, is it's a causative, and this is future actually, and it's a future form. The sigma, the future, merges with the ending, and actually it removes it, and you're left with a circumflex accent over the omicron upsilon. Typically, the accents in verbs want to get as far in as possible, and they can go 3 positions in. And so when you see an accent here, when it could have gone further over the iota, you know that there's been a contraction taking place, or sometimes they might call it compensatory lengthening, but it's because there's been something dropped. And here the future sigma tense indicator has been dropped, and as a compensatory lengthening, you have the circumflex accent over the usine ending. Now it's a little bit hard because the usine ending would be the third plural ending anyway. So you can't really see the contraction because the ending is usin anyway. So the future would be susin. So that's why the circumflex becomes important to observe there. And the object of that is meh, and the subject is here with the passe, genea, and you can hear repetition of e. Now, there's a violation of word order here because you have, for one thing, you have the from now on, and I should say something about the apo to noon. Noon is an adverb. And so you're like thinking, why is that a part of a prepositional phrase? Well, it's being nominalized in a sense with this article. This article makes the noon into an abstract idea of nounness, from now on, from the present time. So you will see the article with the adverb noon to refer to the present time. So it's a bit of an idiom, but it's good grammar. It's fine grammar, but it throws off beginning students because they don't know what they're looking at. Yeah, but from now on. So this is fronted. This is fronted, and the idu is also like a sentence adverb. It's not always focusing on the whole sentence, but here it is. It's at the front of the whole thing. Sometimes it isolates an individual word, but here the whole thing is prominent. And so the prominence, let's look at some of the prominence effects. I mean, the idu sets it off as important. The fronting of from now on is stressing the starting point of what the verbal action consists. So the starting point is now, and it's the future. From now on, they will consider me blessed. And this is the verb related to makarios, the adjective, which is found in the Beatitudes. And it's a very strong idea of blessed. And then, so the violation, we see a fronting, and then we see the verb, and then we have a switching of the object and the subject. So normally you'd expect VSO, but we have VOS, and we have to ask, why is that taking place? And the me is not being stressed here, but rather the last item in the sentence. So you can get stressed by putting things to the front. You can also get stressed by switching the word order, and then you're looking at what's coming last. And so what's last here is all the generations. And it's stressed already because of the inclusive scope that is attending it with passe. Passe means all. So there's a quantitative stress on that, and it's in a final sentence location. And this is a principle I began to articulate, is that when there's emphasis, there's normally more than one way that an item is being emphasized. Here, it's being emphasized by its final position in the sentence, but then also by its quantitative inclusive scope modification. Yeah, all the nations will consider me blessed. All right. Well, fun. A lot going on here. So I need to exit out of the drawing mode, and we'll queue up the next. There's the verb makarizo. We'll queue up the next couple sentences there. We're going to see a continuation of support, and we have ot in verse 49. So there seems to be an alternation of ot gar, ot a little bit there. The ot then is more integrally connected to all the generations' blessing. So 49, let me read it. Oti epi esen mi megala o dunatos, ke agion to onemo avtu. And verse 50, ke to elios avtu is geneas ke geneas, tis phobumenis avton. Because the powerful one did great things for me. and holy is his name, and his mercy is for generations to generations to those fearing him. All right, so I'm going to position this and start doing some marking. In this marking method, it's called constituent marking. It's treated in my Koine Greek grammar. It's something that I've developed. I've been influenced by some people here and there, but really it's something that I've developed and used, and it's very helpful to observe the text and help navigate the text. The OT is starting a subordinate clause. It's marking substantiation. I could put a box around the OT here. It's a conjunction. Conjunctions get boxes. Main verbs are single underlined. You can do this in English too, by the way. That's a dotted underline. It kind of looks like it's not, but it is. And this is aorist, third singular, third singular, aorist active indicative, third singular, from poeo, and megala is the direct object, and then the subject, the powerful one, dunatos o dunatos. The powerful one did to me great things. So yeah, you have a violation of verb word order here. You have VOS, and it could be that what motivates this is that you have when you have sentences, you want to introduce older material first, generally, and then newer material. You kind of break the audience into some new material, kind of ease into new material. But I do think there probably is stress on the subject here, the actor, to switch the order of megala and do not tos. So God as construed as the powerful one, to me did great things, great things. So this is a supporting statement with the OT, and megala is a substantive adjective from megas, means great. And here it's in the neuter plural accusative, megala, great things he's done for me. Ke, and holy is his name. So hagion is an adjective. It's in the predicate adjective position. So you need to remember the different adjectival uses in Greek, and they have to do with positions. And then there's an adverbial use as well. So agion, when you have an adjective, then the article, then the noun, you're looking probably, and those are in the nominative case, which these are, you're looking at the special construction. It's a verbalist construction. The verb imi, to be, is implied. If it were specified here, it'd be esten. And sometimes you do see it specified. And there, when you have the verb esten present, when it doesn't need to be, it makes it a little bit more punchy, more existentially affirmative. This is affirmative enough. Holy is his name. Holy is his name. So the powerful one did this great things for me, and holy is his name. And his mercy, verse 50, and his mercy. And then we also have a verbalist clause. We have to supply, again, probably esten, to be. His mercy is into generations and generations. Is here is pointing towards extension. The accusative case is a case of extension, sometimes extending the action of the verb to some entity or in the creation of some entity. But here it's geneas, ke geneas, is indicating extension of time into generations. So his mercy extends out and there's stress here because it's not simply is geneas, but is geneas ke geneas. The ke geneas is adding more stress to and repetition to this idea of generations. And we just saw this word earlier, all the generations will consider me blessed. It's the same word here. So his mercy is for generations and generations. And then we have the recipients. We have a dative case being used here. And it's a dative case with a participle. This is a substantive use of the participle. That means a substantive is basically a noun-like entity. When you have a substantive use of the adjective or a participle or something, when something is substantized, it's made into a noun. And so here we have this participle from phobeome. Phobeome means to fear. And so these are the ones fearing him. So you might think this is kind of weird. Why is the avton double underlined as if it's the direct object? Well, it is the direct object of the participle. Remember that participle are verbal adjectives, and they can function like nouns, particularly if they have the article in front of them. And they can also take adjuncts or complements. They can take different things like verbs do. Verbs have modifiers, they have objects, and so do participles. They can have these things. So participles are very dynamic to the ones fearing him. So this mercy is for the ones fearing him. The verbal aspect here is present. It's a present middle formed, probably because the idea of fearing shows subject affectedness. Remember that middle formed verbs often construe and reflect action or states of being in which the subject is engaged. And so this idea of fearing is the middle voice is very suitable to that. But this is present tense, so it's imperfective in its aspect, which suggests, again, ongoingness. And fearing him in terms of like great respect and awe. But I mean, I think we need to maybe rediscover a bit of fearing the Lord in terms of consequences. Like he is someone of consequence because he metes out consequences. I mean, yes, his mercy, but we can't presume on his mercy. Sometimes that's all we can do, because when we recognize how utterly abject and sinful we are in his sight, I mean, that's all we can do is fall upon our faces and just plead for his mercy. And the appropriate response is fear, is deep reverence that he has every right to punish us. And mercy doesn't mean that we won't get punished. It means that we're punished less than we deserve. It may mean no punishment, but it may mean less consequences. We still bear consequences of our sin. I mean, we die. We suffer ailments of different kinds. We struggle in relationships and have other hardships. Sometimes nature is brutal against us, and we're buffeted by famines and other terrible things that are happening around us. In some sense, these are all, they all seem to be related to the fallen world in which we find ourselves. And so we just need to be subject to the Lord and to say, your will be done, not mine. And my response is to fear you, knowing that I'll be accountable to you, and that I'll be held accountable for what I've done, what I've said in this world. And so this is a proper posture. So his mercy extends for those who continually are in this state of reverence and fear of God, fearing consequences, and knowing how powerful he is. All right, verse 51, epiesen kratos en brachioni avtu dies scorpisen upere fanus diania cardias avton. He did. This is from poeo. That's a contract verb, epsilon. The epsilon lengthens to an eta before the ending. Here's the augment. Epiesen kratos. Kratos is a third declension noun. It's neuter. It looks like it's nominative. Well, it could be in form, but it's also accusative. And so I'm going to double underline it because it's from context, I can see that it's not the subject, but rather the direct object. He did powerful thing. He did a powerful thing. So kratus, it's interesting. They're translating this mighty deeds, but this word is not plural. The genitive would be us, which would look like accusative plural, but it's not. So this is nominative and accusative in form singular. So it's interesting that they're translating this as mighty deeds, but it's singular. He did a mighty deed in his arm, literally in his arm. He did a mighty deed in his arm. He spread about, cast out, or cast through, arrogant in the thought of their hearts. So those who are lifted up or arrogant. So this verb diascorpizo means to spread about. And there's an augment that sneaks in after the dia, before the dia is a preposition, right? Before the stem, and that marks aorist tense, helps to mark aorist tense. Then we have an aorist third singular ending. So he distributed or scattered the arrogant ones in the thought of their heart. And we have to wonder, what does it mean? What does this dative case mean here? And to mark a case that you're not sure what it does, I use a curly brace. Special uses of the cases that are not functioning as subjects, indirect objects, or direct objects, they get a curly brace bracket, and that helps to signify that something different is going on here. So what is this dative doing here? I mean, the cardias means heart, of tone, their heart. So, and these are genitive. So it's the reasoning or understanding of their heart. I think this is modifying these arrogant ones, the arrogant in the realm of the thought of their hearts, their understanding. So here we can see the translation, proud ones, proud in the thoughts of their heart. And the word here, thoughts, is in fact singular. It has to do, this dianoia is like an understanding. It's related to nous, which means mind, and the dia indicates like a throughness. So it's like the mind interacting as an interactive entity, with the dia meaning through. And so you have kind of a complex of thoughts and ideas, which then is, this word can also then be can be translated or have a sense of understanding. It's understanding that comes because of thoughts going in and through the mind. And that's what this word is describing. So I think as a singular would be fine. Those arrogant in the understanding of their heart. This is the particular way in which they are arrogant, is they have a disposition, they've come to a certain understanding which is in their heart, their deepest part of their selves, and this therein lies their arrogance. Their arrogance is something settled in their understanding, and it's related to their heart. I mean, this is not a good state of being to be in. So the Lord scatters them. And this is a part of the working of the Lord to frustrate evil. And how does it work? I don't know. Like, I think there are mechanisms in this world that if people are this way, they start running into some trouble. They can maybe go a far distance, but eventually they'll run into trouble. But so he is scattering the arrogant in the understanding of their heart. And then in verse 52, kath ilen dunastas apo thronon ke upsosen tapinus. And he brought down, this is from kath ireo. This is kath ireo. We see a pretty radical stem change. This is a second aorist verb. It means to bring down. The kata preposition affix on the front helps convey the sense of downness. As a preposition, it can mean down and in the genitive. And so the other thing I was going to mention is that there is no conjunction here. Verse 51 and 52 have no conjunctions. So they would either indicate a break from what has gone above, or maybe particularizing. There's a move from general to particular. That's a possibility. So little breaks or parallel kind of statements, or maybe there's a move from general to particular. And here it's kind of hard to kind of see the close connection, but because he begins with 51 to talk about he's done a mighty thing with his arm, that could seem to be related. What is related to verse 49? He made great things. He did great things. The powerful one did great things. His name is holy and his mercy extends forever. So the first part of 51 could be like a restatement of 49a. But then 51b and 52 start talking about his opposition and to the arrogant. And here he's bringing down the powerful ones from their thrones. Yeah, so there's a contrast going on. And then he elevates the humble. So here's, you have a couple positive statements. I think as I'm looking at the structure, I would say that you have a positive statement, A, we'll call it A, and then we have a negative scattering of the arrogant. He brings down the powerful ones from the throne, and he lifts up the humble. And this idea of humility we saw earlier, that Mary is rejoiced. She rejoiced because the Lord saw her humility, the humility of his maidservant. So you do have an ABBA movement here. So perhaps the break is kind of a next movement. or it could be seen or it could be seen as kind of a particular statement of the great things that he has done and why he's holy and merciful. But at the same time, he also rejects and frustrates and scatters and brings down the arrogant and the powerful ones. Yeah. And so there's an overturning of power structures that is envisioned here. And of course, it's a reversal. And we see this elsewhere in these opening chapters of Luke, is that what's happening in the gospel is a reversal of power structures, that Jesus, in fact, is going to be someone who brings about this reversal. And John the Baptist, of course, as a forerunner to that. Yeah. All right. This is the verb oops osen, oops ao. The augment is eaten up by the upsilon, so you don't see it, but then we have a nice sen ending, third singular. Yeah, so a lot of aorist tenses. So this is recounting the activities of the Lord. These are kind of like general statements about what the Lord is doing. Does he always do this in a way in our timing? No. Is he still doing it today? I would say yes. But there are processes. It takes time sometimes to see these things being affected. But yeah, these are aorist tenses. So this is Mary's affirmation of the kinds of things that the Lord does. Yeah. All right. Let's go on. Let's see if we can. We might be able to. Yeah, I think we can finish the Magnificat. We'll try. So we just have really about 3 more verses. Yeah, we'll make it a clean cut, I think, there. Verse 53, pinontas en eplesen agathon ke plutuntas ex estilen kenus antelabdeto Israel pedos avtu menesthene eleus kathos alla lesen prostus pateras emon to Abraham ke to spermati avtu iston eona. All right, so I just went ahead and translated it all. And we're going to see some parallelisms here. Continue. There's no conjunction. So there's no conjunction once again. These are just indicate that by a little null sign. So these main sentences are being connected without any conjunction. All right. So what did he do? The Lord's going to do something. Enet plesen is fill in. This is from en pimplemi. Pimplemi, interesting verb. It has a little bit of a stem change to form the aorist. The plesen is third singular. There's an augment. You can see that sneaking in there. And then we have the direct object. Pinontas, the hungry, those who are poor. Yeah, the hungry in particular. He's filled the hungry with good things. Now this is this verb can take the genitive. So here, if we were to go to look at the lexicon, and here I'll have to go out of the drawing mode. If we look at this verb, it's probably going to say the person in the accusative case. This is a participle from pinao, to be hungry, and this is accusative masculine plural. So this is a substantive participle. If we look at this verb, it's probably going to say in the lexical entry that it can take an accusative case of the persons and then the genitive case of the thing. Now, I haven't checked this, but that's what I would be guessing. Let's see if we can do that. So tena, it uses, tena would indicate a person versus t, because tena is masculine or feminine. So you can see fill someone or something of something. So it can be used with people or things. You can fill something with something. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of data with and here this is what we're seeing right here is the tena, accusative of person, with tenos, the genitive of thing, and then it fortunately tells us someone with something, and that's what we're seeing here. Satisfying, he's satisfying the hungry with good things. Yeah. All right. So make sure you look at those lexical entries and learn how to, and this, we're looking at BDAG down here. In my Koine Greek grammar, I think 3 different places I have discussions of how to read the entry in lexicons. And I do some comparative, you could look at LSJ versus BDAG and explain these things, because there's a lot of really important data in these lexicons, which are in their, how many editions have they gone through? Dozens, maybe a dozen editions. So people have been working on these lexicons for centuries, and probably I would hate to even think about how many hands have thought through, how many research assistants and graduate students have worked through the data to assemble these lexicons. I mean, it's an amazing amount of work, and I love them in Logos Bible Software because I can hover over references and get the information quickly. I can find out more about these authors. So I've never heard of this guy, Himerius. He is from the 4th century AD. And if I wanted to find out more about list 5, I could go to list 5, and there it's a listing of different classical authors that are referenced in the lexicon. And I could click that and go to that source, and I can find out which edition, which book it's found. So is Declamaciones et Oraciones. We're just talking about Latin as declamations and oratory. So yeah, a lot of information here. And then the editors of those works. Some of these probably haven't been translated into English, some of these works. So a lot of research has gone into this, a lot of effort. So they contain so much information. All right, so let's go back to our marking. So he satisfied the hungry with good things, of good things, and he sent out the rich, the wealthy. He sent them out empty. So here it's kind of like a discontinuous constituent, because there's a parallelism. You can see that you have the fronting of the object, then the verb, and then you have the second object. And so the same thing happens. There's a parallelism here. And the parallelism is for the purpose of contrast. Now notice that the ke is used to connect them. We normally think of the conjunction ke as meaning, conjoining two things, equal things. And we don't think of ke as being contrastive. Well, in fact, ke does not mean contrast. Ke connects things of equal status or adds something in, when ke means also or even. But here the sense of contrast comes because of the content. And ke can be used in those situations, even though we might translate this as but. I'm not sure if any of our translations translate it. I'd have to leave the marking again to look at some translations. But it's possible that some of them would translate the ke as a but. But I'm so interested, I want to go look at that. Yeah, there we go. First one I looked at. The NIV translates the ka as a but. So, I mean, some are using and, some are using but. So here's the new NIV. How about the New Living Translation? I bet it has a but. Nope, it has an and. How about King James? King James, whew, it's not even linked properly, so I'd have to link it. Let me see. Nope, uses an and. So the NIV uses a but the other ones are using ands. All right. It's kind of just fun to look at that. Verse 54, let's keep marking it up. What did he do? He labeto Israel. Labeto Israel. This is from anti-lambano. It's a second aorist verb. And here it's got a middle form. I'd have to look up whether it's anti-lamban. I don't think it is. I think this is indeed a true middle form. And anti means in the place of. So antichrist is someone who's in the place of Christ. And I looked up this word. It's interesting. It has to do with coming in the place of for the sake of assistance. So coming in the place of somebody for the sake of assistance. And so that's pretty remarkable. So God is helping by coming in, taking the place of Israel, or assisting like from that close, almost replacement vantage point, which is pretty remarkable because in our theology about Jesus, we often see him as fulfilling the vocation of Israel. And here we have almost a statement like that God comes to the aid of by coming in replacement of Israel, his servant. And then we have an infinitive, which probably starts a little purpose clause idea. So he comes to the assistance of Israel, his servant. And by the way, Israel, you maybe couldn't tell, but it's actually genitive. Well, you can't tell because Israel is a name that comes into Greek and doesn't show endings. But I know it's genitive. I would know it from two ways. One, this verb takes the genitive. Two, it's in apposition, and the appositional item, the noun that is further explaining Israel, has to agree with it in case, and usually number, not gender necessarily. And it does. It agrees in gender, in case and number. It agrees in case and number. It's genitive. Yeah, his child, his son, his servant. Pes is like a boy. It means like a boy child, but it often can be used of a boy servant. So it's translated here as servant. To remember mercies. To remember mercies. So he came to aid Israel, his servant, to remember mercies. So this is why God comes to the aid of Israel, is to extend, to remember mercies. And this idea of remembrance goes back to God's history with God's people. And so he's showing mercy to them now. This is Mary singing. This is what the Lord does for Israel.
I have a question about the anti-labeto in verse 24. Because on Logos, it shows that it is in the middle passive. It's
an active verb.
Is it active or is it?
Yeah, it's an active verb, but here it is in middle and form. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the reason for that? Or
well, notice that the entry says in our literature it's only in the middle.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
So it's just that just is.
Well, kind of I mean, just because it's always in our literature in the middle, it doesn't mean that the middle doesn't still have its significance. Again, remember the middle voice indicates the subject's involvement in the action.
Oh, I see.
So it's saying that God is involved here. And the nature of the verb, if So here's the definition: to take someone's part by assisting. Well, you're like really engaged, right? If you're taking someone's part, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes
So
sense.
there's subject effectiveness in that, right? Because you're coming in and you're coming to the aid of. But it's interesting that, I mean, you have to do a word study like in the history of this use, is why, when is it used in the active sense and when is it used in the middle sense, and what's the difference in there should be a slight difference in construal, with middle focusing or stressing subject effectiveness in the action. But I guess it's possible that that someone could report such activity from maybe a non-subject affected point of view, and then use the active voice.
Okay.
Yeah,
makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, it'd be good to do word studies on this.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good. Just as, and then here we have a subordinating conjunction, kathos, forming a subordinate clause. Just as he spoke, laleo, here's the augment, third singular, spoke to their fathers. Now here, it's interesting that we have a pros with the accusative rather than simply the dative case. And I put the dotted lines there, but I also put this in parentheses because, in fact, it is a prepositional phrase. But why didn't this verb specify the indirect object by using the dative case, which is more common? I think there's something a little bit ramped up here. And in fact, interestingly, we have an appositional statement. And guess what? These fathers, which are in the accusative because of the influence of pros, the preposition, there are fathers. Then we get an appositional statement, which in fact uses the dative. So there's an acknowledgement grammatically that there could be a dative indirect object here. And that's indicated by the appositional statement. Remember, apposition is when you abut one noun to another noun and they agree in case and typically number. Although here not number, except because it's plural. Then we have singular, but then we have to spermati of two. So to Abraham and to his seed connects those forever. So God has spoken to our fathers, to Abraham and to his posterity, his seed, forever. So this is a correspondence clause which substantiates why God has come close, almost in replacement to give assistance to Israel. So yeah, this is harkening back to the words, what God spoke to do this. All right, well, we're going to end there, and I hope you found this helpful, and we'll look forward to having you join us next time. Take care.